Um, this is going to be on SinglePayer and how I believe that it can promote entrepreneurship, okay, in terms of innovation for medical care. Because one of the things that occurs to me is that a lot of the arguments that I see against SinglePayer are the construct that it's going to have government controlling everything, and it's going to have, government basically saying what is the definition of health, and therefore it's going to kill people. And that is one of the reasons why I am firm on the concept of any proposal must have no formulary drug lists, no HMOs, which are the things that form formulary drug lists, and decide what is quote unquote medically necessary, and as well as no physical therapy or occupational therapy caps. And also why I want proven naturopathic remedies covered, okay? And, and I mentioned as well the concept of I want medical equipment to be without planned obsolescence. And I really do mean that, especially in terms of the more basic items, there is no reason why a cane should wear out that is paid for by government, funds within 1 to 2 years. There's no reason that one of my joint braces should again wear out in 2 to 3 years. Especially for someone like myself, where I'm going to need joint braces for the rest of my days. Every 10 to maybe 30 years, I'm probably going to need something different. Okay, but again, the range is somewhere between, again, minimum of 10 years I won't. Could really, more likely, it's with some little adjustments, I could very well last in the same set of braces for 30, 40 years, maybe even 50. And they'd be fine. And there are ways to engineer them so that they won't wear out during then or even longer. Same definitely is true, and I've seen it with canes. There's no reason that a cane, again, should wear out that fast. I have 2 of them right now. I have a 4-foot and I have a single regular folding one. To put it mildly, they both seen better days. They're not quite completely worn out yet, but neither one of them is even 3 years old. So the very fact that they're so close to worn out now is ridiculous, and yet it's pretty typical. I mentioned this, a thread or two, with people like Danth and a couple of other folks on Twitter, is that there's no reason for why these things wear out as fast, other than profit margins. So, planned obsolescence is one part of that, but might I add, by saying no planned obsolescence, it doesn't necessarily mean that something will never, ever become obsolete. It just means you shouldn't plan for it to be quickly gone and replaced by something else. Again, same thing in terms of something akin to an MRI, machine, which they are also with planned obsolescence, and yet they cost a lot more. You should plan for something to last as long as possible, and to come with parts that could be changed out, so that, yes, there'll be parts that'll wear out a little bit, but there will also be parts that are genuine that'll stay longer, and ways to upkeep it. And to me, that should be a standard. And it would be so much better for our society to make things like that again, especially in the medical field. But that's one element of the innovation, okay? And by the way, by saying that it is a base point, these things should not wear out, it gives people the opportunity to have a base of a frame to then work off of, to build around that, and know that that will always be there. So from there, they could try different things that are creative, and not worry about, maybe this next trend is going to be next, and therefore by the time I get it out to market, it's no longer going to be practical. By having certain basic standards of all these devices, it takes away that unknown, and it gives people a better platform to be more innovative with these things. And as well, for many diseases that are rare, okay, there are a sizable number of extremely rare conditions out there where it isn't profitable enough for drug companies to make sizable amounts of this, and so therefore sometimes they don't even produce any of it. What they might do is they might have a couple of things that will treat it, but you'll never even see these things, even if the drug is fully created and formalized, to be put on the actual market or covered. I mean, definitely not covered. It won't be covered by any insurance whatsoever. You might get a part of it covered if you pay for the most expensive out-of-pocket plan. You might get a discount, but it won't be all that much. And in the meantime, again, there are many diseases out there that there have been formalized cures, and in some cases, in others, there have not been at all. But the drugs and the treatments, they're not out there anymore. They're not produced at all. And that's a problem for these people, for the people that have these diseases. These conditions, they should be produced. And again, there should be a very, straightforward thing of, if this cures this, your doctor, and you're not allergic to this treatment, you get that treatment covered. Right now, this doctor might look it up. There's a chance that they might actually find out, and if they're a really good doctor, they'll find out, hey, you know what, there is this out there, but the problem is it's either not being made anymore, or it's being made not in this country, or it's not being made, at all, or there's someone working on something, but they don't have enough money to get it off the ground in terms of to properly test it. So, what your kid or your family member or your friend is going to die, or is going to suffer horribly because there's not the money in it. That's what's happening now. It is. We're no longer in the era of private businesses fund most of medical research. That era is long gone. It's governments that fund it. Here and there, you will get ultra wealthy people that will fund these highly specialized small disease things, but that's rare. And for the most part, it ends up being almost like a random happenstance. And also what as well happens is that via generalized medical research, they'll find out cures for whatever it is by accident. And again, these treatments should be out there. With all the money the government spends on generalized research, and on drug-specific research, there's no reason why, by, in essence, by the doctor, in essence, say, look, this is what this person has, if they've never heard of the condition, which again, so many conditions, I get it, some doctors, they just have never heard of whatever it is. And they finally found out that you have it. And guess what? They find out it's one of those diseases that the drug is not currently made, but you know what? We have the formula for it. It's listed in the database. It'll be made for you. And it'll get covered. That's one of the reasons why a single payer, which would, again, continue to fund the rare projects, if anything, fund them more, and along with people who are resistant to various forms of, for the people who are resistant to various forms of treatment, it'll enable them to get the better cures, the better treatments. And it'll also, as well, bring back many of the drugs that they've stopped being made because the patent ran out and drug companies put in more research money and put in essence, lobbying money to get the newer drugs in as formulary, even though they have more side effects. And the older, safer drugs are no longer being made. A single payer system would, again, with no formulary drug list, would allow for both. Because guess what? Sometimes people will be allergic to the older stuff. Sometimes people will be allergic to the newer things. Sometimes in between. But either way, all of these options should be available. Again, the government has put in the money. So prior taxpayers, current taxpayers, this is a dividend. This is a return on our investment as a society into these drugs to get these treatments made available to us. Pharmaceutical companies, the main way that they spend money in terms of the money that they make, that's in advertising. Okay, and they spend an awful lot of it, and they also spend an awful lot of it in lobbying. But again, they buy the patents often from independent or many cases university labs, or government-funded labs, with direct. But either way, we're talking about one derivation or another of one part of government funds for these treatments, and then the government not generally even getting a price break. And that's why the drug patent system has to be reformed. And that's also why single payer will help promote competition and entrepreneurship. Because it'll suddenly help to level the playing field away from big pharma, away from these huge companies, and say to people who want to maybe take a derivative of and combine an old drug that's no longer made with a new drug, and say, hey, you know what? Why don't you go for that? Why don't you try that? Because it'll bring these older, safer things, these older drugs, back into the sphere and allow them to mix and, again, level the playing field. And that to me is one of the things, is that if you're going to talk about quote-unquote free market, it must be regulated and must be an actual market. Because currently what we've got is props on top of props on top of props on top of props, and we've got this in terms of advanced level corporatism. It's not a free market. And that's one of the reasons that it's so incredibly expensive. So, yes, single payer and free market, they actually do go together. And again, I know people that are not quite getting it. They can. They will, if we make this a really good system. Shalom.